So what in your mind, like was there any doubt in your mind after you quit the first one that you weren't going to do the second one?
No. I immediately, as you're sitting and signing the paperwork for your voluntary drop, I looked at my coach again and said, I know you have given more to me than you probably have to anyone who was training to be in this crucible. And I said, I'm coming back. And this time I'm going to come back and I'm going to just pass every standard. And I'm going to make you proud. And so I went back to the hotel and immediately booked the plane ticket that night. I mean, it was within a few hours. And on the drive back, someone asked me, do you wish that you had shot for something smaller, a 12-hour? And I was like, no, because I wouldn't have known how far I could go unless I shot for like the biggest, most audacious goal. Okay, well, 26 hours, at least I know what the gap is, right? And so I'm not into playing it safe or comfortable, because then you don't really tap into your true potential, right? And so again, it was like, okay, well, that's just what it looked like. Now I really have to go to work.
Welcome, Heather, to the Not Almost There podcast. It is so great to have you here today, and I can't wait to get into your story and everything that you've done.
So great to be here, Joe. Thank you for having me.
So I got to know you, Heather, through Unbeatable Mind and the Sealfit community. And this was about 1.5 years ago. And what I noticed immediately is the strong presence that you had in the group we were with, and you could just tell that you were pushing yourself hard. We were doing some physical training, we were doing some mental training, and we'll set all that up to explain what that was we were even doing then. But since that time period, you've done a lot of things in your life. One of those being Kokoro, which I want to actually start the podcast with that. And talk about what that is, because Kokoro is one of the hardest training, I wouldn't even call it obstacles or races. It is a few-day crucible that is meant to mimic as much as possible buds in the Navy SEALs. And there's nothing really like it, so it's kind of hard to quantify. You know, most of the things people do are races, and they're in and out. But this is like a multi-day event, and it was the hardest one that Sealfit Unbeatable Mind has, and again, one of the hardest events that I know of, that I've heard of. I don't know who ranks these things, but I know it's definitely up there. So let's start off the conversation by talking about what Kokoro is, because the fact that you accomplish it is just incredibly impressive. And also I want to get into your first attempt at it, because I know it took you two attempts and what you've learned from that first one. But let's define what Kokoro is, what it involved, and go from there.
Yeah, so Kokoro is supposedly the most challenging mentally, physically, and emotionally training available to humankind around the world, based off of Navy SEAL Hell Week. And when I decided to do Kokoro, I was 46 years old, and I was completely just out of shape because I had lost myself in the process of achieving everything I wanted to achieve. And I knew the extremes in which I operate in, and thought, if anything is going to get me where I want to be, I'm going to have to challenge myself to such an extreme that I have to dig deeper emotionally, mentally, and spiritually to get there physically. And at that point, when I decided to do Kokoro, I knew there was only 19 women that had ever secured the event in history in over 13 years. And yet somehow I thought, in my shape, never doing a push-up, never running a mile, like nothing. Like I just knew So I registered, and the rest is history.
Let's talk about what Kokoro is in more detail. So it is how long?
So it says 50 hours. It's usually between 52 and 54 hours long. It starts on a Friday morning over in California at Vail Lake, and it goes through the night, full, for the full 50 hours. And what you're doing is evolution after evolution after evolution. So you're doing log PT, you're doing surf torture, you're rucking, you're doing relay races, you're on the grinder. So anything that you can imagine that they do in the SEAL training, minus the boats and whatnot, as close as possible in that environment, they're simulating.
And during this 52 to 54 hours, there's no sleep,
No sleep.
right? You're awake during this whole thing. Is there a time when you get a break at all to do anything?
You get to eat, for sure. Yeah, so they definitely take care of you. I mean, they can't push you to the point where they're hurting you. And so you are properly hydrated. You are properly fed. When you need to use the mountain, you're more than welcome to use the mountain or whatever to take care of business. But as far as rest, no, you better learn how to do the proper breathing techniques in between every evolution to rest yourself. But yeah, no sleep.
So how did what was the first evolution like? How was the first day?
So the first evolution, each evolution I say is about 1 to 2 hours. And that's magic, because if you know that, then all you're doing is, okay, one more evolution, one more minute within the evolution. So that first evolution, when you get picked up from the parking lot, is a 1 to 3 mile run to the grinder. And the grinder is just what it sounds like. It's a whole bunch of dirt, fire ants. There's the pull-up rig, and there's coaches and there's water hoses. So it is just dirt and water, whole lot of metal, and bodies going through what you would consider your basic PT. So you're doing push-ups, you're doing pull-ups, you're doing flutter kicks, you're going through ice baths, you're bear crawling, you're low crawling, all of the military PT for about 2 to 3 hours in that first breakout session.
Wow. And they're spraying you with hoses and screaming and there's sirens going on and smoke. I'm sure they're emulating all that. And then how many people were in Kokora with you? How many people started it?
Yeah, so the first one that I did was in March, and that one was pretty small because it was still like COVID's going on, and so there's a lot of people who keep deferring their registration. Not me, I just go. So there were 16 of us that started that Kokoro Camp 56 in March. It was the coldest Kokoro ever. And so I learned a lot of valuable lessons about my limitations. I'll say more mentally than physically, because I believe I was physically prepared. But 16 started.
Got it. And then the second one, how many started?
The second one, we started with 28, and then we ended with 16.
Okay. Oh, got it. Okay. So what were the main differences between the first one and second one? Was it just a lot more cold? The first one, was that
It was cold. It was beyond cold. So it was in the low 40s with wind and no sun. So you were in the ice bath. So you're soaking wet the entire time. During the evening evolution, when you're climbing Mount Palomar, it was in the 20s and 30s. And then that next morning, or you're like, yes, I made it. I'm here. I'm getting through PT. And then the ice bath started again. And there was something about that cold that physically my body stopped. Like it just all cramped. My face was cramped up. My legs cramped up. Thought maybe I was having a stroke. Couldn't get the tension to release. Finally got it to the point where I managed it, where they got me a little bit warm. But as soon as I went back in the cold, it happened again. And if you can't walk, you certainly can't carry a 300-pound log. And so I knew it was my time.
Gotcha. And how long were you in the first one before?
Yeah, 26 hours. 26 hours
26.
in before
That's incredible. And did they pull you, or did you just say I'm done?
I have to say I quit. I quit. Yeah, because I actually didn't have hypothermia. I was having physical symptoms that made it impossible for me to go. But I still believe that there was probably something I could have done in here to shift that. But at that point, I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't have my swim buddy to say, you're not quitting. And so it was my time.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it was like, I'm so happy it happened the way it happened, because what transpired between March to July, like,
yeah.
I wouldn't trade that for
Well,
the
yeah.
world.
Hold off there because I want to dive into that for sure. But I'd say that even just that comment you made is so you and so strong and like such a good nugget for people to take away here that you, even despite the weather conditions being below freezing, you're saying, yeah, I had symptoms of hypothermia, but I still quit. Where most folks would hear that, I know, I have to say, like, I don't know how I would have reacted there or what I would have said to that, but it's unbelievable the mental fortitude that you have to even state that.
Well, what's so interesting is that it took me a while to say that. And when I said that, it was so freeing because, I said, no, other people made it. So there is a way. If I actually own the fact that there is more work to do, whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually, whatever it is, then I had the capacity to do more. Otherwise, I would have just been a victim of the circumstances. And that's just not how I live my life. So yeah, it was like once I really was able to say, Heather, you quit. It wasn't that your body failed you, you quit. Then I was like, okay, I need to go to work. And that's all I did. Yeah.
And how were you able to say that to yourself? Like, was there a moment where you talked to someone else and they asked you a question that you introspectively thought of, or what happened?
I want to say, until I said that, it felt like I was out of integrity with the world.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right. It didn't matter if my body stopped. It didn't matter if it was cold. I quit.
Well, I was following you on social and knowing you were gearing up for that, and I've never seen someone more prepared for something than you were. And when I heard that you didn't make it, which you stated first, I think it was you and Brian at the same time, my friend Brian, who's been on this podcast, railed a few months back. I was shocked because you two were just like the strongest physically and mentally strong. And I'm like, man, if they didn't do it, like who accomplished this thing? So I know it took a lot for you to give up, especially because of how much work that you put into it, which was incredible to watch. So let's rewind back a little bit, and then we're going to go back even deeper soon. But in order to prepare for something like this, because I met you, I don't know, 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half. We were at an event called Unbeatable Mind together, and at Unbeatable Mind had some physical elements to it, but nothing like this. So what made you actually say, like, here's what I want to do. I want to do this. And then how did you take yourself from saying yes to actually training the way you did?
Right? Yeah, you say yes, and then you're like, I have no idea.
What I do.
So
Yeah.
again, like nothing happens by accident. So I said yes, and then something called COVID happens, and there's no gyms or anything. And so all I knew to do was like to start running. So I ran and push-ups and, just again, like, how am I ever going to do this? I can't even make it around the block. How am I ever going to do this? I can't even do sit-ups. Until the point the gyms reopened, and what do you know? There was someone there who kind of looked like he might be military, because I didn't know anything about Unbeatable Mind. I didn't know anything really about Sealfit. I didn't know if there was a training program. I just thought I could do this on my own or find someone. And I walked up to this guy once I got the courage after seeing him 3 times in the early morning when I trained. I said, I signed up for this thing and I don't know how to do the training, and you kind of look like you're military. Would you be interested, or do you know someone who might be interested? And he said, what's the information? Can you send it to me? Anyway, so I did. The next day he came back and he said, how long do we have? And I said, 7 months. And he said, we can do it. Turned out that he was actually Special Ops Delta stationed here over in Florida. And he took me under his wing and basically put me through simulated boot camps every single weekend. But that only lasted for 2 months because he had to go off on assignment and he could no longer train with me. Like, that's a whole nother story in and of itself.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Fascinating that he just said yes to this random woman, and this random fat woman just walked up to him in the gym, and yet he said yes. And I go to him all the time and say, I hope you realize that because you said yes to me, I now get to use this story as a way to impact the lives of others. And while you provide freedom for us, and so you already make a difference in this world, that ripple effect. And he never took a cent. Never took a cent from me, because his only purpose in life is service. And he said, there are 1 million people who watch those videos or read the book Can't Hurt Me, which I did by David Goggins, and they think about doing it, but they never do it. When you asked me to train you for something like this, all I asked was you don't quit, and you would refuse to quit no matter what and I was like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So then you want to talk about like levels of accountability. Do you think that after someone gave their time, their energy to me for no reason other than to be of service, that I could ever quit? Like, no way. It wasn't who I was, but that was like even a greater accountability. But once he left, I was like, now what? I mean, I was only 2 or 3 months into training. I still can do a pull-up. And then all of a sudden in my email, I saw this, I thought it was spam from this company called Unbeatable Mind talking about tip of the spear. I saw, there's some that will be my training. And I thought that I was going to get the physical training necessary to be able to secure Kokoro through this program. I was wrong. What I got was so much more, but that's how I was able to create the structure.
I was going to say, because when I saw you, you were pretty fit. So it was like several months before I saw you that you started training for this. You just signed up for it.
Yes. Yeah. So I had been training 6 months before meeting you.
So it sounds like that accountability, meeting the gentleman that was in the Delta Force, was a huge kind of game changer for you to just keep thinking, like, I can't quit. This guy took time for me. And now he's out, who knows where, protecting the country. Do you feel like the next thing that you do or you go after, you're going to want to find someone or declare it or get help to find that same sense of accountability?
Yes, 100%. I mean, and that's really what I have found through this training program with people like Brian, is we're not meant to do this alone. We're just not. And when you surround yourself with others who are not only like-minded and really excellence, but you couple that with excellence for a purpose, like, there's no way you're going to let each other down. And there's no way to always be up. We always have our dips. And so when you're not seeing it in you, they see it in you. And so there's that constant reminder of who you are, what you're committed to. And when you need the support and accountability, they're right there, always ready to support you, right? Just because they know of what's possible when I hate using the word achieve. What I like to say is when you're fully manifested in this world, they know what's possible for the rest of the world. And so they won't let you stop. So it's a different accountability. It's not, did you do it, did you not do it? It's so much more.
Let's unpack a few things, because you mentioned and alluded to, like, you couldn't do like a pull-up, you couldn't do push-ups like 6 months or 7 months before seeing me. And then I saw you and I was like, wow, you're pretty fit. So like really level set with us. What could or couldn't you do when you first started this? And why'd you start with something so big, like the toughest event on the planet?
Because I knew that there could be no compromise. Like there was no like, oh, that's good enough. I either had to go all in or not at all. Like you couldn't fake this in any way, shape, or form. You just couldn't. And so literally, I could not do a push-up, like barely. Pull-ups. When I saw you, I still couldn't do a pull-up. Like I couldn't. And I knew I had to get to 6. Running, again, like I wasn't a runner. And I just realized, okay, so if who you are going to be is a Navy SEAL, you better get that you are a runner. What do runners do? Okay, this, how do they train? And so it was just every single day relentless, being okay with the very little improvement, knowing that over a period of time, the time was going to pass. So I could either look back and say, you did it, mama, or you didn't. And the only person I could look at was myself.
And how old were you when you signed up for this?
46.
You're 46 years old, and you're a mom, and you have how many children?
I have 2 children. So my son now is 20, and my daughter is 17. Yeah.
That's amazing. What did they think about you signing up for this?
So I had to just tell them I was going to be okay, right? Because they're used to mom doing these type of things. I'm always like, okay, I'm going to Saudi Arabia. Like I'm always just taking these huge leaps. Nobody can understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I know.
Yeah.
And so this was the next thing. And so they just said, okay. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because in order to do something like this, you really need the support of those people who are closest to you, because they see you go through a lot of pain. What we do is simple, training 5 hours a day. It's not easy. And they saw me in a lot of pain a lot of times, but I would just have those open conversations with them so they understood why. And when I would ask them, do you know why I continue to do this, even though you see me complaining a lot? Because you're trying to make a difference. And that's all like, okay, here we go.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you're training for this for 7 months. You get to the first Kokora. Was it what you expected aside from the cold?
Yeah, it was. Because I felt ready. But I didn't know what I didn't know, right? We talk about, we train so that when we're put to the test, the training unfolds. Well, you don't know if your training is good enough until you're put to the test and you're like, oh, wait, okay, this is what it looks like. So I want to say in that first Kokora was more thinking about what I needed to do rather than just going.
Just doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's amazing the 26 hours that you spent, and I mean that's half of it, right? I mean, almost exactly half. And then from that point, as I alluded to, I watched this kind of unfold almost live. Like you had using your words, you quit. I wouldn't call it quit, but you stopped. And then you immediately kind of declared or you explained kind of what happened. And then like the next day you're like, I just signed up for the next one. So what in your mind, like was there any doubt in your mind after you quit the first one that you weren't going to do the second one?
No. I immediately, as you're sitting and signing the paperwork for your voluntary drop, I looked at my coach again and said, I know you have given more to me than you probably have to anyone who was training to be in this crucible. And I said, I'm coming back. And this time I'm going to come back and I'm going to just pass every standard. And I'm going to make you proud. And so I went back to the hotel and immediately booked the plane ticket that night. I mean, it was within a few hours. And on the drive back, someone asked me, do you wish that you had shot for something smaller, a 12-hour? And I was like, no, because I wouldn't have known how far I could go unless I shot for like the biggest, most audacious goal. Okay, well, 26 hours, at least I know what the gap is, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
not into playing it safe or comfortable, because then you don't really tap into your true potential, right? And so again, it was like, okay, well, that's just what it looked like. Now I really have to go to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the all right, so now you're getting ready to train for the second Kokoro, your second attempt at it. What is different about you at that point? Obviously you have now the knowledge of what to expect. What else was different, and how did you train differently for the second time?
Yeah, so I knew that it was never really about the event. And this is really important, that whatever I was doing could absolutely be correlated to every aspect of life. And everything we do in the physical realm, right? Our training it really does correlate and then transcend into every aspect of our life. And so I turned it into like, it wasn't about the event. And how many of us are really shooting for some big goals when it comes to business, when it comes to our relationships? Do you really expect it to go right the first time? Like, how could I even have thought that it was going to go right the first time? And so then I turned the whole context into, this is about resiliency. This is what it actually looks like to not succeed, like to fail, and say,
Yeah.
okay, what is there to learn? And so I just took on this context of, I'm going to show others that you don't stop. You actually go harder. You actually find the reason why might actually be different. And so when my why shifted, before it was like, make a difference, show others what's possible. It's available in everyone. It was about, wow, no, this is a full expression of who I am in the world. How can others use this journey to find theirs too? And so my training became, like, physically, I knew I was ready. There was more to do physically. So I trained harder physically, but it was more about the mental. How do I have pain and find a way to move it through my body? How do I detach from pain? How do I use visualizations to really pull me through the 8-hour silent ruck when it hurts? How do I just shift really from detachment from this physical being and allow the training to make the body just go? And that was the beauty, is like, wow, what I realized is that we may think that this physical form is limited until you really get that your mind, your heart, and your spirit are limitless. And when you can use that to push through, you keep pushing through. And so it was like, wow, we are so powerful. And I was also committed that I knew it wasn't about the event, it was about the journey. I never forgot every single moment that I got to train every single day, that I was going to be the only woman to ever go twice, right? And so it was like, I found so much joy in just like, oh, like, who else gets to say they play with logs? Who else gets to say that they play in the dirt? I do, right? And I'm doing it with people I love. And what if just this story and me doing this can make an impact for others? Like, okay. So I just fully embrace it as this was just the journey that I was going to use, no matter what it looked like, to make a difference. And so it became really fun.
Yeah, it's incredible. When you're going through this though, how do you balance this positive attitude, which you clearly had before and now, with like just getting the shit kicked out of you during an event? So like, are you smiling the whole time? Are you just like, bring it on, guys? Or is it you're miserable, but then you gotta remind yourself, hey, I'm in this, and then you start smiling? Like walk us through that
Oh gosh. So I can't tell you how many times the coaches were like, do you ever stop smiling? No. Because I got a couple things. No matter what was being thrown at us was for our growth and development. I knew that, right? So no matter what you said to me, whatever we were doing, I knew it was for me, to push me to a place to see, do I cave or do I not cave, right? And so it was like, bring it, bring it. And then also, it was the fact that I could. Like, I could do it, and I could do it better than most. So it was just, there was so much appreciation for the fact that I was there again, that I was able to do it, that I was able to be present, just to how cool it was to be able to play for 3 days. And I'll never forget that last logged PT where others are just, their faces are, cussing, screaming, negative. And I'm just like, I was crying because with a smile on my face, thinking, this might be the last time I ever hold this log. Yeah. And I'm, 47 years old, and I did it. Like, how cool. And so if I can do this, right, you just realize, okay, if I can do this, how does that translate into what I can actually create in this world? Yeah, it's so fun, right?
Yeah, no, it totally is. So when you secured it and you finally had completed this, that you worked now at this point years for, what was that feeling like aside from gratitude and excitement? What else did you feel?
So you might be able to really relate to this. Very few can. It was just, I'm home. Of course. Yeah. Of course you did. Yeah. Right? I'm smiling now because I haven't lost that experience. Oh, this is what it feels like to have nothing internal or external stop you from manifesting who you are in this world, no matter what it looks like. Right? And so it was like, wow, okay. And I've said, so many times, like, not in my wildest dreams. And I'm like, no, actually, I've always dreamed this big, who would have thought? Well, I've always known. And again, I go back to that book, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, because I read that and I just said, that's me. Huh. And how many people actually read that? Some do, and say, that's in me too. Okay, now how do I unleash it?
Let's dive in there, because I wanted to ask about that next and really what inspired you, because you've had a lot of transitions in your life, and you went through a lot before that book came out, because I too read that book. It was very profound for me to read it as well at that time in my life, which was like 2019, I think. Or the very beginning of 2019 is when I read it, and my wife read it with me as well, and we both were fascinated by the story of David Goggins and the before and after, and his alter ego that he created, and just everything that went along with it. And in that year, I was fortunate enough to be able to get him to speak at Refuel. I had him, I don't know if I told you this, but I had him actually host a run at my house. So we ran with him, and he shows up at my house and it's like 15 degrees out, Chicago weather. He's in shorts and like a long sleeve shirt and a beanie, and he's like, let's go, come on. And his assistant who was planning the route was like, yeah, I thought he was going to do like a 5K to make it as inclusive as possible. And they're like, and she was like, yeah, he won't do anything like less than 5 miles. So plan like 5 miles. So we did that, and a bunch of PT along the way, which he just seemed like this human robot. But it was, talk about meeting someone and getting a feeling for them. Like when I met him, I actually led the run with him, and I'm looking at him. This is kind of embarrassing to say. I always run with like headphones on. Actually, I don't do it as much, but back then I did, because it helped me get through what I was doing. And now I actually I prefer them off. But nonetheless, back then I was running with headphones. I didn't know where I was going to be in comparison to him in this run. But since we were leading it together, I'm looking at him like we're running next to one another. Obviously, he could have ran much faster. He was being nice. And I have these headphones on, and he's not talking. He's just like so focused. And I'm listening to this playlist on Spotify with him dubbed over this like rap remix as I'm looking at him. It was the most surreal thing ever. But I guess that's my long-winded way of saying his story is truly inspirational. And when I heard from you that lit a spark, I want to dive in more to that story and what really stuck out to you and how that was different from the stuff you've already went through in your life, because again, you've been through a ton.
Yeah, it's so interesting because the teacher always finds the student when they're ready. The books always are opened when, they're supposed to be just perfect. And what it told me, number one, is like, I just knew the potential was there. I knew it was there. And what really rang true for me is it's never too late. It's never too late. Who cares how old you are, right? He was older when he went through 3 times. No matter what you're up against, it's possible. Just do it. And again, that my call name with my team is Taker. Like, how does that happen? Like, how does someone like me, who in October of 2019 read that book and couldn't be further from that, 2 years later be known as Taker? So to think that in 2019, I am just at my wit's end, running this company, physically just sacrificed everything. And I read that, and then a year and a half later, 2 years later, my call name with this team is Taker. And for me, that was like the ultimate manifestation. Like, whatever you see, when you believe it to be true, like, you can actually become it. Like, that's like the coolest thing in the world when you realize that. So if I can become like Navy SEAL Taker, I can do anything. Yeah. So the one thing I would say about Goggins versus me is I want to be the taker with love. Right. So while I cuss when necessary, I definitely want to share more positivity and love and encouragement along with the story. And here's another thing too, just real quick, when it comes to doing things physically, I really believe, like, the reason I chose this event too is I thought that at the other side, I would be better off physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, versus just doing, a bodybuilding competition, right? Like, it wasn't about just having a certain body and doing whatever was necessary. No, I really wanted to be better off holistically, having done this training and event. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm almost positive that everyone who listens to my podcast knows David Goggins and some of his story. But for those who don't, David Goggins wrote a book, self-published, 2018-ish, I think, called Can't Hurt Me, became one of the number one bestsellers. I got it for so many people as a gift. I think at some point you couldn't even find it on Amazon. And it's a story of a guy that was in a shitty job and was turned his life around by getting inspired to become a Navy SEAL, and had to lose, like, how much weight was it? Like 100 pounds in like 3 months to even qualify to be able to get into buds and to try and get through it. And it took him a couple attempts, and he finally did it and changed his whole life around. I mean, it's an incredible story, and he goes through so much adversity in his life, and it's very well written. And I highly recommend, if you haven't read it, get the audiobook, because the audiobook has some really cool nuggets where he's actually doing podcast style interviews after every chapter and then commenting on them. So it's one of those that it needs to be on your required reading list if you're a fan of this podcast, for sure.
100%.
Yeah. So I guess going back even before that, you kind of said in passing that you were running this company. So like what made you, and I guess, like, how did you have time for this if you're running a company? What company were you running?
Yeah, so I was running a business here in Florida on 30A. We were a full concierge equipment rental company. We serviced 2,500 homes. And I kind of stumbled into that too. So I am someone who always puts what I coach and train and consult into practice. Always. Like, I do the work first and then I go out and lead. And I had been doing leadership development across the world for 5 years. In the previous position in Texas, I was a chief people officer, teaching leadership development, people development, things like that. Anyway, so I had moved to Florida to actually just start consulting so that I could be present for my children during their high school years. And my first consulting gig to transform the culture of a company was with this company. And within the first week, he said, I think I need you to run the company. And I thought, yes. It was just like, I just said yes. And then what occurred to me was like, okay, you've been the one who's the soft skills and your coaching and your training. And what's the one thing they say in the boardroom? You don't actually know how to run a business. So it was my opportunity, my sandbox, to not only run the business, but use everything I knew to transform the culture to actually put it into practice. And sure enough, so I took this failing business and within 2 years got to a point where it was where he was selling it, and that happened in February of 2020. So for the first time in my life, I had the permission from myself to stop and really do what was required for me to put all of my preaching into practice and really focus on me. So I said, for a year, you are doing nothing but taking care of yourself and healing from the inside out. That's when I registered for Kokoro.
Got it.
Yeah. So that probably ties it all together. And so now, now it was my turn to go, okay, integrated leadership development. What does it look like to be integrated in self-mastery so that I can actually be my best so that I can serve? And that's where we're at right now. So, okay, I got what it looks like and feels like to actually give yourself permission to take care of yourself as a leader, as a mother, whatever, so you don't get lost, right? You see what's possible. It's like, wow. Okay, so now how do I maintain that same level of self-mastery while also doing the work, whatever the work is? Like, don't know what that looks like, right? But how do you maintain all of it, keeping it in balance? It's just this beautiful flow every single day. So that's the next phase of this journey, maintaining who I am, taking care of myself, and also serving.
Yeah, I mean, you're truly incredible, and not to downplay other coaches out there, because there's wonderful coaches, but a lot of what we see on the internet today are people that talk a lot and maybe not do as much.
Right.
And there's counterexamples to that, of course, but you are someone that, not only do you talk about it, but you do it. And I respect you wholeheartedly for that, because it's incredible to have watched this. And my next kind of question is along the mental side. So I know you started with the physical, and obviously the Goggins book is very much about physical. If you know and you follow David Goggins, it's pretty much all physical. But when you started getting into mental training through Unbeatable Mind and other things you were doing, like what's something that surprised you when you started to practice that, and what kind of tips, I guess, you have for other people that are looking to get into something like that?
Yeah, so when you start physically training, you realize that you would never, ever want anyone to hear what actually goes on in your head. And I realized, like, wow, like, Heather Marie, you are someone who coaches, mindset, but when you put it to the test, look what you're saying, look what you're thinking. That has to shift. And initially, as I start these practices of the positive self-talk or the mantras, I'm like, this is lame. Like, really? This is going to shift anything? And then you realize, oh my goodness, like it does. So when you're that aware, and you're forced to be aware, you are in the training 5 to 6 hours a day, and it hurts. You are constantly aware of what's going through your head and what you need to do to stop that nonsense, because it doesn't serve you. I'm like, it doesn't serve me. It doesn't work. And so looking back now, I giggle because I remember that woman and the things she used to say in the conversations before training, the conversations during training. And then what happened, Joe, is that each time I completed training, I had the experience of what it felt like to do it. And that was more powerful than all the negative conversation. So that experience, I'll say, of winning, every single evolution during my day, because that's all we have every single day. We just have all these evolutions. When you start experiencing what it's like to do the work despite the fear, to do the work despite the uncomfortable, to do the work despite the pain, then it's like, oh, maybe that's all just a story too. So that work of shifting the context of everything to an experience you want to have of yourself when you complete the work, an experience you want to provide for others, something shifts. Then it becomes more of a natural expression of who you are. And then I just get to train to see what arises, to see what additional learning and development that I get. And again, like I shared with you, being able to be with pain and realize I too can shift that. Like there's one thing, I'll share this, which for me was like, wow. So stretching, like there's so much resistance there, right? I was like, oh,
I'm with you.
You know, it's like the one thing, it hurts, right? But on the other side of resistance is performance, right? Okay, so you get through, okay, do whatever mobility training I need, get through the resistance for performance. And as I'm stretching one day, coach says, you know, if you were under anesthesia, your body would just collapse. And I was like, so it's only this waking conscious mind that tells me, oh, that's not comfortable, stop. What else am I telling myself I can't do physically? And so that too has been huge. So this mind, we know it's so powerful in either a very positive way or a really negative way, but learning how to manipulate your physiology through your mind, it's incredible.
And what kind of mental training helped you the most? Like walk us through a day outside of the physical training, which we know was in abundance, especially during this time period. Like, what were you doing mentally?
Yeah, so obviously in the beginning, it just started with something called box breathing. I'd never done any breathing. I was surprised that I didn't know how to breathe. Like, oh, you're not supposed to breathe through your mouth. So just basic, elementary, like what is, oh, wow.
Yeah, why don't you explain box breathing quick
so
for
box
those
breathing is a 4-part breath work where you inhale for a certain amount of counts. So say breathe in for 5, hold for 5, breathe out for 5, and hold for 5. And the whole point of that is you immediately signal your body to go from the stress state, the sympathetic, into the parasympathetic state. So it's just that calming. And it also allows you, once you get skilled at it, to go from beta, high activity, down into the alpha ways, to go from the conscious, alert, thinking, rational mind to the subconscious. But that takes practice and that takes time. But just initially control your physiology, then being able to get to a point where you use that breath work to get really focused. And then you use that breath work to really open and expand what's possible, because you're then actually looking as a witness to your thoughts. And that's it, right? Just that heightened awareness. Breath work progressed so much so I don't run, I breathe. I don't do pull-ups, I breathe. I don't do push-ups, I breathe. Every single movement throughout the day is a different breath pattern. So again, when you realize how powerful your breath is, you own your life. It's unbelievable. I could spend a whole hour just talking about breath work and how powerful it is. And again, like you said, like nothing I do is like, oh, this is what it sounds like. No. Like I have to embody it. I had to learn how to use this because I would have never been capable to get through Kokoro. But now it's just life. So daily now, the practices never stop. I'm really into Joe Dispenza. And so that type of, visualization. So energy matching and in coherence with the energy in my heart and soul, right? Consistent with the energy I'm putting out. Very, very into at least an hour of breath work in the morning, whether it's box breathing, then into some sort of meditation. I have all of the journaling practices, right? And then proper fueling of this body so that it is in sync. And I'm not putting anything, and I always say, like, I don't want anything to block any energy coming in or going out. So just that beautiful flow and synchronicity of the mind, body, and spirit.
So dive in a little bit more on the, you don't do push-ups or pull-ups, you breathe. Like how does someone listening to this go from starting box breathing, which I recommend as well. And if there's one thing documented in terms of what the Navy SEALs do to practice, is box breathing. Like, they're undoubtedly, indisputably, that's what they do to, that's one of the techniques they use to calm themselves down under stress. And Navy SEALs that I've met in my life, I'm sure you have the same experience. The one thing that I see is, like, they're just level people. They don't get excited. They're just level. And I think it's because this conscious breath work over time that's really helped them. But unpack that a bit in terms of, like, what does that mean when you say I just breathe, I don't do pull-ups?
Yeah. So as I progress, so running is the great, and you brought it up too. When I first was running, I was running and it sucked. And so to distract me from the running, I was always listening to music or a podcast or something. Mm-hmm. And during initial training, if you have earbuds in, get them out. I was like, oh, like, really? And then you start to connect with your breath. And then you start to connect with mantras. And then you just get into this flow where it's beautiful, where there is no running, there's no time. You're just meditating, right? And I always run in the middle of the night around 4 a.m. So it's just me and the stars and nature. And so initially it's like, oh, it hurts. And then you get into the right breath cadence, and then your body just goes. It knows what to do. When it came to push-ups are great. I know when I breathe in, I know what I need to push out. And so it's an inhale and exhale for push-ups. Every single movement, once I learned how to use my breath as the power and the fuel, then I just needed to know how to control my breath. And again, you're talking a year long of figuring this out, but power. And so through Kokoro, a great example is you hike uphill for 4 hours at a 9.5% incline or gradient. And you've got a ruck on, so there's pain. But if all you're doing is breathing, 10 after 10 after 10, incorporating with some beautiful visualization of the night sky or a family member, you're not rucking. You're just doing what you do, right? And so it's incredible. And again, it has nothing to do with rucking. It has nothing to do with running or push-ups. But in life, when we're really going through challenging situations, you use the same thing. Breathe through it, right? Like, what energy can I create here to give to you so you experience love or compassion or whatever it is you need, right? So it's using that to the extreme so that during every single day, no matter what you're dealing with, you've got this.
Yeah, no, that's so well said. And I love that. And just like I talked about a few minutes ago, the taking out the earbuds actually made the runs much more enjoyable versus, like, before I was like, oh, I get to run to listen to this podcast or to listen to this audiobook. And then what happened was I'd find myself 40 minutes into it, feeling like it took forever for, whatever reason. Then I'd take my earbuds off and I would just focus on what was around me. And it seemed to fly by. It was just like much more, you can get much more in a flow state with that. So it seems counterintuitive, but I would highly recommend people try it.
Yeah. So you have to be really comfortable with being with you. Right? And so you can't wait to spend that time with you. And then it's also, you get to dream the day a lot of times. If you have an assignment that you're trying to complete or whatever, right? The book you're trying to write, whatever. I mean, it's like, that's when it all comes. So it's like, it's very special, sacred time.
So you said something pretty powerful earlier about chunking goals and looking at the evolutions and not the whole thing in front of you. And when I recently completed the Spartan race, that was 31 miles. It was really tough for me. That's how I looked at it too, as I was like, you can't look at things that big and say, oh, all right, well, I'm just going to do this 31 miles because you drive yourself crazy. I was like, I'm just going to do a mile at a time and just keep moving forward progress. And I think whether you're we're talking a lot about the physical fitness side, but when I created my businesses, it was the same thing. It's like, things take a long time. And as long as you're moving forward in a direction, like, and that's what I tell my team all the time, is like, go in a direction, and every direction you're going to go in may not be toward the goal, but at least you're moving and figuring things out.
That's it. That's all there is to do. And yeah, life can be overwhelming. Absolutely. And so all there is to do is, I know I've got one more breath, and another one, and another one. I know I've got 10 more. Whatever it is, you always have one more, and then it becomes a game. And the day's going to pass. The week's going to pass. The year's going to pass. Do you want to look back and say, I did it or not?
Yeah.
It's just a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing that I realized lately. It's like, if not now, when? Like, if you're not going to do it and make a commitment, when are you going to do that? So I think it's not too often when I talk to someone and I already figure out the name of the podcast, but it's like, for you, it's like, say yes. Like, you just say yes, and then you figure it out from there. Now you're committed. Yes. And now all of a sudden you meet someone who's in the Delta Force, which it's so rare to meet someone in the Delta Force in itself.
It is about saying yes, and I love that is creating your future. Like, that is how you do it. You say yes, and then you live into this possibility. And then what's also so important too is any of us can achieve anything we want. We can, right? But right now, do you love your life, right? Because it's not about there. It's about right now, every single day, like loving who you are. Right? There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to improve. There's just the unfolding of who you are, and enjoying the process every single minute. Because if you're not, then you're missing the whole point of this life.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. So one of the things I struggle with as well, and I hate to bring this up even because it's a little bit of a negative sentiment that happens in my mind. I'm wondering if you can help me with that. Like, once you accomplish something so big as Kokoro or that Spartan Ultra run, you kind of, like, for me, I get in this little funk, and I'm like, oh man, that thing's over with that I just trained like a year for or 7 months for, and you feel a little bit lost. So do you just say yes to the next thing, or like, how do you go about taking that next step to kind of keep that momentum?
Yeah, so that's so great, because I experienced that too. Each time you're like, okay,
now what?
Now what? And especially, I wish someone had told me this before I did Kokoro, is that whenever you operate on the extremes, which you probably do like me, there's got to be this like whoosh, switch back. So for 2 years, I was really just in that performance and out there doing. And now I'm in this, right back to the inner. And I have to be okay with just listening. So, okay, now that has unfolded into my life, what has changed about my purpose, my passions, like, where am I? And I have to just listen, which is really, really uncomfortable. So I've gone to the extreme of just being in here and here and in here, right? And just listening. Yeah. And I absolutely believe, like, I'm so clear of the experience I want to have in life that it will unfold. And I have to not be tied to how it looks, because had I been, I wouldn't be right here. I just wouldn't. And so I'm beautiful that I have the experience of that I can say I can trust not knowing. It is not a comfortable place to be. And yes, I say yes to everything. I do.
Yeah, that's great insights, and I can attest to that. So when I try to sit down and write my purpose and my personal mission statement and figure out my why, I would be staring at this blank piece of paper for a long time, and it's still like it's a work in progress. But it led me, like, my company led me to create the yearly event called Refuel, which I think you know about, which led me to create this podcast, which then led me to create an event called Go, which combined activity with inspiration, and that led me to what will be part of my next thing, which is creating a non-alcoholic brewery called Go Brewing, and it's just serendipitous how it all worked out, and I could tell you, Heather, that I was sitting here for many months, I would say years, just being being patient but impatient at the same time, because it's hard to know that there's something happening, but if you take steps, life starts to unfold in front of you, and you don't know these dots that are going to be connected in front of you. You always can see it after they happen, and you're like, oh, that's why I did that. And that's it's just something I learned, that and I think you saying what you said is like, the pendulum swung, and I just need to be patient, and I need to listen. It's almost like you just need to just listen to the universe for a while, and all of a sudden things will start to unfold. And they are now for you. Like you're more part of Sealfit, Unbeatable Mind. You're a coach. I talked to some other peers there, and you're doing a lot more with that group, and that's unfolded for you that year ago that wasn't a possibility.
Right. No, I love that you said patiently impatient, because trust who I am is crawling out of my skin. And I'm just like, that's just my soul saying, let's go. But I'm also unwilling to just go until, again, you listen. Does this feel right? And I truly believe that my life, and I know we didn't talk about it, but adversity and challenge is an understatement, but there's a reason why my life has been laid out the way it has. And I truly believe it's to go through the challenges and overcome, and then somehow be able to provide others access and tools so that their journey is just a little bit less painful. And so I've done it in so many realms, but now I'm at this, okay, how do you really serve your full potential and have what others would say is a business, right? Like, how do you have it all? And what is the and again, enjoy the process along the way. So I showed in the most extreme physical environment how to do that and enjoy your life along the way. And now there's like, how do you have the balance of that and the business and the family? And so I think there's just more of the unfolding that needs to take place before I can push publish on my book. Because I just want to make sure, like, this isn't for me. Like, who would do this, right? I just want to make sure that I'm able to provide access to others in an easy, practical way that they too can live the life they love, whatever it looks like, in service of something much bigger than themselves.
Yeah, that's so well stated, and you are an unbelievable inspiration to me, and I know anyone listening to this podcast, to see what you've went through. And again, like to your point, we didn't touch on your entire life here, but you can sum it up by saying you went through a ton of adversity in your life. You overcame and still overcoming challenges, and really started just saying yes to things. And I think that is to me, not to simplify your journey, but when you started saying yes, you started taking action, and all of a sudden things started to unfold for you, and here we are today. So
that's it.
I'm excited to read your book when you do decide to write one.
Right. And I think the most important thing for both of us is we're both smiling right now too. Yeah. Right? At the end of the day, you just got to smile at who you are and what you did, and what people say about you, right? The experience you leave for others. It's awesome.
Yeah. And I know there's people out there searching for someone like you to help coach them, to give them that spark and mentorship. How can people find out more about you, Heather, and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm on social media, so Facebook is the easiest place to find me, but then also for coaching and any of that type of work, Unbeatable Mind, they can find me there.
Cool. And that's unbeatablemind.com.
Unbeatablemind.com, yes.
Yeah, great. And we'll link to all this in the show notes. And again, I just I can't thank you enough for you being just an incredible human from the day I met you to now. It's you've been unequivocally just like this positive force, and the world is better with you in it. And it's just I want to have more of these conversations, and would love to do an adventure with you at some point as well.
For sure. Well, I could say likewise about you. You inspire me. I am so just humbled and encouraged by the work you do in this world. So thank you for everything you do for so many people. And yes, we are definitely getting an event on the books.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you,
awesome.
Heather.
Thank you.